Okay, this is the final video in federalism. It will be short. I really want to focus on the growth of national government power. So we left off talking about how can the federal government engage in unemployment or give money to education or have welfare programs or give money to states for bridges. These are all powers reserved to the states. This isn't federal government power. Um, and the key thing is that we now operate under a different model of federalism. There's a different way that the federal or the national and state governments interact. Um, Unlike the dual federalism or layer cake federalism of the past, now there are these, our problems are more complex and it takes a good deal of money. And there's this multiple interactions between the national government and state governments. And this has opened up the possibility for there to be more federal government control over things like welfare, unemployment, and transportation. So we had dual federalism and now we have cooperative federalism. Just a recall exercise, take 15 seconds and pause and try to fill in the blanks here for the theory of new institutionalism. So pause. Okay, that is change in context. Whenever you see a change in rules and practices, you always look for a change in context. In this case, we went from dual federalism to cooperative federalism. So, key question is what changed? And what changed is the massive growth of the federal government or national government, massive growth of that government, particularly its financial power. So this is these are two graphs that I'm showing you. I like this one that comes from the University of Oregon because it goes back to the founding. The blue line there is the uh, uh, percentage of uh, the it's the uh, government federal government spending as a percent of gross domestic product. So how big, how much federal government spending is there, nationwide? How much economic activity is generated by federal government spending? And if you look, at the founding, it was about 2%, and it hovered around 2% up to the Civil War. During the Civil War, federal spending went up because it had to prosecute a civil war. But afterwards, it dropped back down to about 2%. And then it spiked back up in World War One. So when we fight wars, we spend more money. The federal government spends more money. Then it dropped back down. But notice that right about 1932, it started trending up and it hovered around 8%. And then it, it spiked quite high up to 40% during World War II. It came back down, but it's always been above 10%. And this first graph stops in 2002, but you can see since 2002, it has risen consistently above 20%, and it really spiked again during COVID. But right now, federal government, about one out of every $5 of our economic activity is money spent by the federal government. And they spend it on things like transportation, education, social security, roads, and things like that. This effort by the federal government to help improve our economy it, and provide some economic protection through things like unemployment and Social Security. That is something that occurred during and in response to the New Deal. So the New Deal was one change in context, because the states could not solve problems that occurred during the New Deal about the loss of jobs and money. So that was a bigger problem that individual states couldn't solve. So the federal government started assuming that. And then after World War II, as the US became a global power, that also is a change in context that has increased the spending of federal government. So we have a sizable defense budget post World War II, where we didn't throughout much of our history. And so those are the things that change in context, the economic safety net put in place during the or in response to the Great Depression and during the New Deal, and then the rise of the U.S. as a global power. Those are the changes in context that have increased dramatically the amount of money taken in by the federal government and its willingness to spend that money on police power areas, these powers that are theoretically reserved to the states. And that happens through this spending clause and the necessary and proper clause, that Congress can, and provide for common defense and the general welfare of the United States. So this is the way that federal power has grown, both through Supreme Court decisions and in response of the federal government to what occurred during or in response to the Great Depression and World War II. And finally, um, if you look at where do state governments get their money from, about one out of every five or one out of every $4 that state governments spend on education, transportation, and other necessary things, a one out of five or one out of every $4 comes from the federal government. So states rely on it. Federal government uses its financial prowess to achieve a more systematic, a more universal approach to solving public policy problems.